Hey
There it
everybody,
goes.
welcome to the Strat Fan Forum Football Show. We're back for part two with Tyke. So let's kick it over to Tom, my co-host, so he can get us going. We're back.
Hey guys, this is Tom. We're going to do part two of our Derby preview review. I like that. And I had a couple of questions. Actually, believe it or not, I got a couple of emails, Dennis. I don't know if you received any emails from guys asking you questions, ask Derby or things related to the show. I got a couple of quick emails before we get into some ratings. I know Zeb Strong had sent me a couple of emails. One he asked was, Tyke, how do you feel about doing your ratings preview so soon after the regular season without including the postseason? I know that Strat always says the cards are quote-unquote supposed to be based on the regular season only, but we know that people like Bob Sanders, the issue we talked about last time, got a card more because of the postseason play. I was wondering if Malcolm Smith maybe got his 4 last year because of the Super Bowl performance, even though Seattle's defense was so great. They had so many backup 4s last year. Do you feel like the postseason can really affect any ratings at all, or not really?
I would have to say that the postseason can affect the ratings just because of the Bob Sanders effect and because of the guys that start. I don't know, the ratings, I guess, the guys that play. I think the 2 Carolina guys we talked about last week, potentially Ben Wickery and Trey Boston, they've come in and played. They made the playoffs and stuff, so very little. I certainly don't think they affect the running back, quarterback, wide receiver cards at all. I don't think they have any effect on that. You might get a little tinge towards some of the rated, players.
And if a guy is starting in the postseason but maybe didn't start in the regular season or only the last few games of the regular season, and not for health reasons, just because of a coaching decision, likely the bump would only be maybe from a 0 to a 4 if the team played really well. You doubt a guy's going to start only the last few games of the regular season, start the postseason, and suddenly get a 5 out of nowhere, even if his team wins the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, I can't see any. I know I would lean towards the no. But I don't know. I'm not sitting there when James makes the ratings and stuff like that. So my guess is that it's only used for positional stuff. But
okay, and another question that I have myself. It's always interesting to me how it seems like, I haven't studied it closely, but how it seems like a number of backup tight ends will get a blocking back rating and a number of them won't. And have you looked into under what circumstances a backup tight end might get a blocking back rating and under which circumstances he's just a tight end?
I have never looked at the backup tight ends. I haven't rated them. I've honestly tried to put the tight end that has the most catches in the starting lineup. That's typically what I'm trying to put in the lineup because, it's kind of an offensive game. Those are the guys that we're looking at. We want to see the Jimmy Grahams. We want to see the other guys that are out there, the Julius Thomases. So, the guys that we have that are getting the ratings are the ones I'm trying to put in there so we can see. And honestly, I'll probably be going back and looking at those grades on those guys to see if I want to give any of them 0s and stuff like that this year.
Yeah, that's another question I had. How often do you actually go back and revise it? I know that it's a kind of a work in progress, but do you have any set times where you say, well, hey, it's the end of the month or the beginning of the month, I'm going to go back and nick this out, or do you just say, hey, I read something, I'm going to go update my ratings?
That's a good question because I do go back. I actually last year feel like I spent a little bit more time on blogs and some other articles, and I want to go back and do that. And I am going to go back and do the wide receivers and the tight ends and the kickers. But I do like actually to take about a month break or a 2-month break because it gives you a chance to go back and look at it objectively. You get so caught up in talking about it and reading it, and sometimes going back and looking at it objectively actually makes a difference. So I actually do tweak it quite a bit.
That's good to know. That's awesome. Tom, did you have any other questions?
No, I think we can go ahead and proceed to the Houston Texans.
Okay, I'm gonna try something here with the Texans. Somebody had a suggestion that as we go through the teams, we show them on the screen. So I'm not sure if you guys can see the screen. Here's the Texans ratings. Tom, do you want to pick out somebody here you want to talk about?
Well, I'll see. My screen is currently blighted by this quarterback picture from this guy in the Seahawks, number 3. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but anyway.
I see Tom and I see black.
Okay, so maybe this screen sharing thing won't work, but I'm going to take it off now. What I showed was just the ratings up on the screen, so I'm not sure if that actually will come through in the podcast. We'll see when we watch it to see if it basically was just a screenshot of the Houston Texan ratings. So now Go ahead, Tom. Tell who do you want to talk about?
Sure. Well, let's see, Tyke. First thing that jumped out at me from the Houston Texans projections was offensive right tackle Derek Newton getting a 5.5. He was a 0.3 last year. I think he's been up and down ratings in the past. I did read good things about him this year. And the Texans have gotten some pretty good run block ratings over the years from Strato. What do you think about Derek Newton and his rating?
I would admit I didn't go back to. I do keep last year's ratings on the grid, so he seemed to grade out. And then with Arian Foster being back this year, and he had a really good year, they averaged 135 yards a game on the ground. And the thing I like, Houston's a good team to look at for rushing yards because they aren't like Seattle and they aren't like the Jets and they aren't like San Francisco because they don't have a running quarterback. It's just all straight yards. So this is a team with a heavy rush percent. What do I got them at here? 46% of the time they rush the ball by my account, which was one of the highest in the league. So I gave them a bump across the line. I kind of thought about Brandon Brooks on a 6 a little bit, but thought the offensive line needed a good jump.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Strat, I think, has graded that team since Foster's been so good there, with very good run block ratings. It's funny you mentioned that point about the rushing quarterbacks. A lot of times when I've heard people say this team is number 1 or 2 or 3, whatever team it may be historically in the NFL in rushing, I feel like the quarterback running should somehow sometimes be excluded from that because a lot of those yards are not coming out of the true ground game. They're not designed runs. You take a team like the Falcons when Michael Vick was there, especially his first couple of years, they were very high in the league in running, but there really weren't very many designed runs from Michael Vick. The Seahawks are different because they do the zone read and this and that, and I feel like a lot of Russell's runs are designed. But that's a good point you make, though, and that in Strato anyway, certainly the overwhelming percentage of your quarterback's rushing yardage, if he's a must-run guy, are going to come from the must-runs and not from any designed run.
And I'll add in, just so everybody knows, my rush percentages for the guys that I think are going to be pistol guys, I subtract 30% of the runs off of their runs because I know that they're going to have more designed end runs in an end run column. So the Seattle, and actually I think on Vic and Kaepernick, I subtracted the runs off because they're going to get these end run columns and be pistol guys. So that's calculated into my rushing percentage, if you will.
And you're referring, of course, to the pistol formation, which Strat allows us to use since a couple years ago with RG3. And those guys tend to get end run right columns that aren't nearly as devastating, so you feel a little more comfortable trying to call an end run right with those guys, correct? Trying to call an end run with those guys, I should say.
Well, I think they did that 2 years ago. It was totally, they boosted the end run. They gave the pistol formation, but then they screwed the end run right. Now, last year it seemed to be a lot less devastating to run an end run right as opposed to 2 years ago. I don't know if you saw that yourself, Tyke.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they fixed it a little bit. I still wonder sometimes if you play a stock replay, if I've got Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson in the game, with Marshawn Lynch's end run, I don't really know why I'd ever run, Russell Wilson's end run, but there is instances where you can go to certain formations and use those formations. In draft leagues, it's extremely valuable to have a pistol guy.
Yeah, no, I like to. I mean, I play the Seahawks in just about all the stock leagues, but it's extremely effective if you put you stay in base, you go to a shotgun formation, and you're in the pistol. slash shotgun. So people see Marshawn Lynch and Michael Robinson there, or whoever your fullback is. They're not going to be as apt to plug those end run ratings, and they're going to think, oh, he's passing here. He's got the blocking back set up. He's in the pistol. And then you can catch him if they have a zero linebacker or if they have a tendency to double with that outside linebacker. So there are instances to do that. But we'll talk more about the Seahawks when we get to them. One guy I wanted to ask about on the Texans is Jonathan Joseph. He's been a 6-3 of the last 4 years.
Yep.
The other time he was a 5. What did you see in his play this year? Was it just a health thing or a lack of production?
Well, for Jonathan, I looked at him because I know he's been the 6 before. So I think, like I mentioned, that Sean Smith was the only non-Pro Bowl 6 that I gave out. And I looked at everything else. The Texans as a whole were kind of, solid against the run, kind of mediocre against the pass. He graded out solid, but not great, not getting the Pro Bowl bid. So I went with the solid 5. It never surprises me if Strat goes back to perennial ratings. There's a couple of guys in the set that fit the bill across the board for guys that have been 6s, like Leon Hall. We talked about Leon Hall for Cincinnati. He's a guy, it wouldn't shock you if they were, but to me he was a 5.
Fair enough. How about DJ Swearinger? He came out as a rookie, got the rookie 0. Did his play improve? Do you think he might get a 4?
Yeah, I think I was between on Swearinger and Lewis trying to figure out which one was going to be the 4 and which one was going to be the 0, honestly. I recall being very torn on which one I wanted to go, so I guess that means both of them could be 4s. But I decided they gave up 28 TDs, went back and forth, and decided to go with Lewis as the 4 and Swearinger as the 0.
Deal. Tom, anything else on the Texans, or should we go on to Indy?
I noticed that you've got Brian Cushing as a 5. You just mentioned, he didn't make the Pro Bowl. I know he used to be a 6, but he's coming off of numerous injuries. I just thought that was interesting, and I think a good call on your part. And I think at this point, if you're a Brian Cushing owner, you're happy to get anything that's a 5+ and have him on the field after him being injured so much in the recent years.
Yeah, the linebackers all got bumps on this team. They only gave up 6 rushing touchdowns and 105 on the ground, so the linebackers got a bump. I thought their play was a notch above Pickett and Crick. It wouldn't shock me to see Pickett get a 5 with this defense, but
interesting. Okay. As we move on to the Indianapolis Colts, had the upset victory in the NFL yesterday over Denver. And for anyone who hasn't heard, John Fox is leaving the Broncos. They're mutually parting ways, which I think means that they told him we don't want you anymore, and he said, okay, that sounds good to me. I guess that's what that means. I'm not sure. But looking at the Colts, pretty good pass blocking here. I was a little surprised with Hugh Thornton, the right guard, getting a run block 5. We all know that the Colts have difficulty running the ball behind, especially with the dreadful Trent Richardson getting all those carries. Otherwise, on this team, wasn't anything that really leapt out at me. I know Mike Adams got a lot of good press this year. He was kind of a surprise guy in the NFL to this late in his career be playing well. Vontae Davis, I think, either made the Pro Bowl or certainly his reputation and his performance looks like a 6. There was really nothing here that really leaped out at me. What about you, Dennis? Anything on the Colts that made you go, this is an interesting type of a projection?
Well, I think last year they had Robert Mathis out there with a 6'12". When he went down with an injury, that gives an opportunity for another player to step up. You have Bjorn Werner with a 4'6". Is there any chance that either Walden or Werner gets a 5? Because typically, they had that last year. Is Strat going to take that into consideration at all? Is there any chance that they get a little bit of a bump, maybe not based on play, but based on a number being available?
Yeah, I actually looked at Walden being the 5. If there was one of the guys that I was debating whether or not to give a 5 to, it was Walden. This team offensively, just real quick, the pass blocking numbers for them are pretty spectacular because they played, against Houston. Cherilus is going to go up against J.J. Watt. So, and their sack numbers going against the teams they played actually mark out at over, 31 sacks, 31 attempts per pass. So they kind of got a little bump with how bad their passing game, or I mean their running game was in comparison with some of the teams that they played against. So, you know, they did very well. You see the 2-7 tackles, which is difficult to get. I'm kind of expecting them to, you know, I think Ahmad Bradshaw played the half a season. I think he might get a typical Ahmad Bradshaw. It'll be very limited, but he'll get a good card. And, you know, they'll be able to do it. Dwayne Allen was a 75 2 years ago before he got hurt. Might have a shot at another one. Hard to say, but an interesting player there.
You want to save some time and go on to the next team then?
Yep. Looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars, first thing I notice when I see these ratings, pretty easy to see, pretty easy to see how you're going to lose a whole bunch of games in a stock we play with the Jaguars. When you look at these ratings, then you consider the quarterback and skill cards that they're going to get, which is accurate, I think. I mean, they were pretty bad. I read a lot of good things about the rookie right guard. I think he's a rookie, Brandon Linder, but they notoriously had trouble with the pass blocking and the run blocking. The 0 pass block for him is going to render him as a guy who's probably going to drop in drafts next year. Did you read anything good about him, or maybe I'm confusing him with someone else?
Well, you know, when I do rookies, you know, Strat doesn't give a lot of ratings out on rookies. So as I go down through the rookies, you know, we talked about a couple of guys, the kid for Cleveland. We talked about some other guys in there, and Strat doesn't hand out a lot of ratings. So you're talking about a really bad football team here, and you can see the sacks per pass down there at 9.6.
Ouch.
Is one of the lowest that I've ever had.
71 sacks allowed, and throwing about 100 times less than the Colts, who only allowed 29.
Yeah, I mean, it is bad deal. What do I got them here? They threw the ball. I got to scroll over here for a second.
557.
Yeah, so I mean, they're a horrendous team. You know, they're going to get sacked every time they step back, which is actually, you know, the 2 tackles being, you know, 3s are actually might be pretty good. So it's going to be interesting. This team is, you know, the 2 5s I mentioned, 2 5s. I think Bryant and Marks are probably the 2 best players on the team, you know, as a whole, as secondary. It's hard to see a 5 back there, so there's the 2 5s that I gave out. But it's just a pretty bad team all the way around.
Yeah, I knew they had given up a lot of sacks. I didn't realize it was quite that many, 71. Having said that now, maybe some of these other guys will get hit a little more. You think it's possible? You have a left guard 4 who's blocking a high linebacker on a team with a sack every 8 attempts. The tackle 3s, maybe you might see actually worse ratings there for pass blocking.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see. I mean, Pastor could get a 0 just because he only played 8 games. You know, the guys that don't play very much, and you have that turnover at positions, you can always see bad ratings. It's an excuse for Strat to kind of pick on those guys. I gave Beatles the higher just because he seemed to be the biggest name on the line, if you will. Typically,
sure.
He played all 16 games. I went back, looked at his other ratings from past years. You know, I like the guys that are consistent players, play all 16 games. They get a certain rating. So, you know, that's why he ended up with the 4.
I read. Go ahead, Dennis.
I was gonna say this team's gonna face the Texans twice, so those 3s are gonna get to J.J. Watt, and he's gonna have a field day on them.
Yeah, the asterisk too, Watt's asterisk. You know, if they don't have a good blocking back out there, that could be automatic for all we know.
Yeah, you've got him as a 10, J.J. Watt, I believe, right?
Yep.
I actually had looked at Chris Clemens on Pro Football Focus. One of my teams in the spring needs a defensive end. I was curious what he's going to be next year, and I see that he graded out very poorly, and he gave him the 0. I think a lot of Chris Clemens owners would be surprised at that. I know his reputation is primarily as a pass rusher. He was a 5 last year, but what I read, he graded out really badly.
He was.
I think that 5 is from. I think that 5's got to be from. That's a Super Bowl bump right there.
Probably, yeah.
I know you say that they don't take the postseason into consideration, but every year before that, Chris Clemens was consistently a 0. Even when he was great as a pass rusher, 0-11, 0-10. Last year I thought he's maybe going to sneak the 4, and when he got a 5-6, I was like, wow, okay. And that's with Michael Bennett on the bench. That's the reason why he had to get something, because otherwise, if he only got a 4, and you got Bennett on the bench as a 4-10, of course you're going to start Bennett.
There you go.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs. Interesting with this team. I read some good things about Rodney Hudson. I think he actually got one or two votes for the Pro Bowl or the All-Pro team. I forget which. So you got him as a solid 5.5 his first time. Travis Kelce at tight end. You mentioned that tight end run blocking can be difficult to project. Pro Football Focus is the only site that does it. You said he graded out very highly there. I think their run percentage was maybe not as good as I was thinking because it is Andy Reid. I don't remember. I can't see now on my screen where it is. But he graded out very highly. Do you think there's any possibility he might get a 6?
I would be extremely shocked. He's not technically a rookie. It's his second year because he was hurt last year.
But his first card.
You know, and Strat is tough about these guys that catch the ball a lot, you know, because I think he led. Do I have him leading the team? 60. Yeah, he led the team in catches.
Yeah, he had a good year.
He had a fantastic year. I like him for the 5. I really do. I had heard he was a good run blocker before the season even started. Graded out well. So, I mean, I can't say that he won't be a 6, but he would become extremely valuable if he was a 6.
Yeah, he looks like a real solid player that someone's going to be pretty happy to get in the draft next year. As a tight end, he's not an Antonio Gates type of tight end, but maybe in the 20s in a draft league next year, someone will be pretty happy to get him. So we go to the defensive side of the ball. This is an interesting team where they have a bunch of big-name guys who do real well and get the 6s and the Pro Bowl nods. You've got Dontari Poe and Tamba Hali and Justin Houston with the mighty 6-12-12. And then, you know, a bunch of guys who are 0s and stuff like that and aren't really too well known, you know, James Michael Johnson and Jay Howard and Philip Gaines. So that's interesting, rather, and I think makes sense. I was intrigued by this free safety 5 for Ron Parker. I'm going to assume, I didn't look at it, that he started the year a corner and shifted over when Eric Berry had the terrible diagnosis of the cancer. What do you think about Ron Parker's rating?
Well, this team was interesting because this is a team that isn't on TV for me. So they only gave up 22 passing touchdowns, 203 yards passing, and remember they got to play Denver twice and San Diego, which is not a bad passing team, twice. And, you know, as bad as Oakland was, Carr actually had a pretty decent year. So, you know, this team, you know, when you play those 6 teams and you're only giving up the kind of yards that they gave up, you know, I felt, you know, they graded out well. And when I went back and looked at it, I'm like, someone back here's got to get some ratings. I think they graded out well, and that's where Sean Smith's 6 comes from. I don't necessarily use Pro Football Focus for everything, but he graded out fantastic there. And then, like I said, you look at the defense, passing defense, and it just made sense. It looked like he deserved a 6.
Yeah, and Hussein Abdullah.
Go ahead,
Dennis.
I was going to say one guy I liked on Kansas City's defense is Alan Bailey. I think he played really well. I'm kicking myself for not taking him in the autumn wind supplemental draft. I had the first pick in round 6. And after watching him for a few weeks early, he looked like he was a playmaker. And I'm going to go on record here. I think he's going to come up with a 5, but I could be wrong. It just might be my preference. I don't have him in that league, but he just looks like a player to me.
He was a guy that was well regarded as a prospect in Pro Football Almanac a couple of years ago, and they extended him, I think, late in the regular season. So that'll be interesting to see if he develops, even if he only gets a 4 next year, or if he gets to 5, as Dennis thinks he might. He'll be a guy to watch, I think, in coming years if he becomes an improved player. Hussein Abdullah, the strong safety, is an interesting guy. I've read a lot of good things about him during the season, but he had always been a journeyman before this year. And then all of a sudden this guy comes out of nowhere. He's almost 30 years old. He's around 30 years old and starts playing really well. So I think the 5 jives with what I was reading. Were you surprised in reviewing guys that this guy who's kind of always been just floundering around as a backup 0 was so highly regarded this year?
Yeah, you get a couple in every set. There's always a few in every set that come out of nowhere to snag those ratings as backups. I mean, I can't think of it coming to the top of my head, but there's always those guys in every set that come out as backups and steal a rating. And again, this team played in a tough passing division.
Sure.
They graded out. So
Interesting. Okay, so let's move on to the Miami Dolphins, Fish fans team. Let's see. As I look at Miami, interesting things that crop up to me. Jared Odrick as a starting defensive
It
tackle.
worked, Dennis.
Yeah, I know. I figured out if I show Firefox, it actually seems to work. So
It's gone now, but it maybe you might have to talk though to see it. That might be the.
Let me see.
Oh, there you go. It's on now.
Yeah. So go ahead and talk about it while we're looking at the ratings.
Yeah, when it disappeared, it said there was a message that said Dennis Crowley is no longer presenting. So I don't know if you clicked something off there. Looking at the Miami Dolphins, Jared Odrick as a starting defensive tackle. I didn't look at the snaps. I guess I thought of him as more of a fill-in type of guy. Jelani Jenkins, a lot of good things were written about him as a rookie. But really, again, not a lot here for me to dispute. I mean, or that even leapt off the page at me. Juwan James, the rookie offensive tackle, 5'5", I guess, was a little bit of surprise, only because he's a rookie. I know he's a first-round pick. The Dolphins had still rumored to have some problems with the line, nothing like last year. But how do you feel about that Juwan James rating?
Well, here's one where I graded Brandon Albert a 75 at left tackle. He did only play 8 games. But I graded him off of the 8 games, and he did play almost 600 snaps, I think, which would be over half of the snaps. James went over and played left tackle, and then they put Dallas Thomas in, I think, over at the right tackle spot when Albert went out. So, if Albert does not get rated, I think that he should, just because he's on my Strato team. So, but I do think that Albert played over half the snaps. So that's an offensive line caveat there, and defensively, pretty blah defensively out there. 121 yards on the grounds, 222 in the air, which is actually pretty solid. But you do have to play the Jets and the Bills twice, which is nothing special. So it was just kind of went through it, didn't it? I mean, Vernon getting a 5 over there might be the surprise of the line, actually, since he's kind of was known as more of the pass rusher guy. So I took a shot giving Vernon the 5 on the defense. I think he's the guy that might be the surprise, if you will.
I'm gonna go on a line again, or go out on a limb, and give Jelani Jenkins the 5. He's an impact player. I think he was always a guy when I watched their games on Game Rewind, always making plays, always in the mix, really fast sideline to sideline. So we'll see if that comes true. It's another one of those out of left field type of ratings, but I like him. I think he's a good player.
All right, very nice.
Well, he's a good young player. They've got a couple of good young players. Maybe the Dolphins are finally heading in the right direction if they're not held back too much by Joe Philbin, who I know a lot of Dolphin fans are frustrated by. Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings. First thing I noticed was left tackle Matt Khalil getting a 4.2. But I'm a Matt Khalil owner in one league, and I have to say all I read about all year long was that he was doing a terrible job. I don't know if he was playing banged up or whatever, so I can't complain with that rating. I know that some owners who perhaps didn't follow the write-ups during the season will be surprised, and sometimes you have a guy who gets drafted in the top 10 or top 12 and gets a couple of good ratings, and then your Strat owner feels like, well, this guy's entitled to a good rating in perpetuity, and that's not the way it goes. So if you're a Matt Khalil owner, this Reds projection I think is pretty solid, and if he does a little better than that, it's probably largely off of reputation. On the defensive side, Mike Zimmer's impact was felt. The Vikings defense was much improved this year. I see Sharif Floyd getting that 5.6, makes him into a solid player. If anyone drafted him last year fairly highly, they'll be happy with that, I think. Anthony Barr is a rookie, 5.6. I think that's pretty solid. He got really good write-ups, a little below C.J. Mosley and Khalil Mack, but still a good-looking young linebacker. Xavier Rhodes supposedly came on. He's got a 5. I mean, again, as we get into the second half of these ratings, it just shows me what a good job I feel like you do, Derby, because I don't have a lot here that jumps out at me. Dennis, what do you feel?
I really like the rating for Harrison Smith. I really like the rating for Xavier Rhodes. I thought those were the two best players in their secondary. And the two best players up front, again, you nailed it with Sharif Floyd and Everson Griffin. It'd be interesting to see if one of those guys gets a 6 up front. Now, I'm not saying they will, that they deserved it, but remember, we're replacing Jared Allen, who was a 6'9" last year and has been a perennial 6. Does Strat kind of want to keep that balance in check and give one of those guys a 6? I'd be interested to see what happens on that aspect. I'm not predicting it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know, Dennis. I think if you lose, I mean, Jared Allen was a perennial Pro Bowler. I think you lose a perennial Pro Bowler off the team. I don't think that impacts the rating of the guy that replaces him.
Well, I just think that the numbers there, that their Strat's playing with a certain number of 6s and 5s, and when a 6 leaves, that opens opportunity. It could be that 2 people get a 4 that would have gotten a 0, or somebody gets a surprise 6. Now, like I said, they're probably. I think the 5s are good projections for both of them. I think if one of them was going to get a 6, it might be Sharif Floyd in the middle with that defensive tackle 6 that shifts to a 5 and a 3-3-5 out of a base 4-3. Again, it's not something I'm predicting, but I just wouldn't be surprised if that's the only thing I could see that might be a surprise when Strat actually announces the real ratings.
This is a good team here. We were talking about Matt Khalil. We haven't talked a lot about it, but the numbers above him, 16 games, the 10 is the number of penalties he had, and the 14 is the number of sacks he gave up. That, I think, was the highest combination in the set for any player. I mean, we're talking a guy that sounds like he should have been benched.
So that's the numbers right here that I'm highlighting, the 16-10-14, the 14-1-3. These numbers represent the games, the penalties, and what's the last one?
The number of sacks they gave up according to host stats.
Wow. So that's like 24 negative plays for Matt Khalil.
Yeah, I mean, he was a sieve. I mean, the worst left tackle, the sack numbers jive between hosted stats and Pro Football Focus. This was a poor player at left tackle. Another guy, I did want to talk about Rhodes for a second. I did look at penalties, and I'm going to go back again, but Rhodes, I think, had a lot of defensive penalties against him as a corner. I just remember Glenn did a podcast a couple years ago, and I know they don't use it as a rule of thumb, but I think when they get into tiebreakers on players, I don't remember what player he brought up, but he brought up how many penalties that the player had against them, and I think that they do look at it. Rhodes had a bunch of penalties against him. So again, it doesn't mean he's not going to get a 5. There's a lot of guys that have penalties against them. I know that Darius Slay had a lot of penalties against him as a Lion, but I think he played well. Charles Woodson always used to have a lot of penalties. So you just never know. But just so everyone knows, I do look at penalties sometimes as tiebreakers on players.
Interesting. That shows good detail on your part. Boy, those 14 sacks allowed by Matt Khalil, it's like the anti-Pro Bowl. I guess if you're, if you're a defensive player with 14 sacks, you're going to Hawaii or wherever they're hosting the Pro Bowl. So I guess if you're giving up 14 sacks, that's not, like you said, that's not too good. Moving on to the New England Patriots, fresh off the exciting victory over the weekend against the Baltimore Ravens. Patriots at times in the Belichick, Tom Brady era have gotten some really strong offensive line ratings. This looks like a pretty solid group. I guess the two that are worth commenting on, Ryan Wendell at right guard. He's bounced back and forth between center and guard for the Pats. In recent years, there was talk of them benching him, not being that happy with him. And then this year, I think they had a third guy in the rotation at center and guard, even when all these guys were healthy. How do you feel about that 5-4 for Ryan Wendell?
I think I probably rotated because of Stark and Wendell. And, this gets tough because, I really try not to use Pro Football Focus for everything that I do. So I probably used Football Outsiders a little bit. They pretty much grade everything tackle, and middle guard, so you can't really tell. But I tried to balance it out. It's not the rushing. In the past, the New England has surprised you. They usually average 120, 125 yards a game on the ground. They did not have that running game this year. Yeah, one thing I mentioned is I look at number of rushing touchdowns. There's another team, Oakland, we'll talk about, but I'm not sure how many rushing touchdowns they have, so that might have led to me giving Stork a 0. I don't have it in front of me.
You said that you were going back and forth on Wendell and Stork. You were considering 4-4 in the run block for those guys?
Yeah,
is that what you mean?
4-4, 4-0. Sometimes you just don't know how you want to structure it out. I mean, 108 yards a game on the ground is in between. Sometimes the ratings are a little nondescript. They just kind of grade out. I know Wendell had played in the past. Stork is new, so it's a balance. And offhand, I can't say what was going exactly through my mind when I gave these ratings. If I gave Wendell a 5, he must have graded out well on Pro Football Focus at the very least. Sometimes if they have right tackle as a good spot, I might consider tackle and guard since it's one side. So
when we're talking about the offensive line, tough to complain about a rating when you got 3 7s on the offensive line for pass blocking. But interesting to me, they were only sacked 26 times here by your number. But you've got the left tackle, Nate Solder, has only a 5 pass block. I say only. 5's a good rating, but for a left tackle, as we know, that's where you're going to see a lot of good pass rushers. You feel like he gave up 5.5 sacks by your numbers there. That
Solder is actually my player. And I know they benched 2 or 3 of these guys at the beginning of the year when they started out bad. But the numbers are the numbers. He came back and he played strong. I'd certainly love to see the 7. By the numbers, he might deserve it over Vollmer. My reading or whatever or experience out of it, and even some comments on the forum is that Vollmer was the overall better player. I think Solder probably was pretty good in the second half of the season in the playoffs. But I had heard that Vollmer was the better player, so I thought that made more sense to go that direction. I think Connolly's, generally speaking, always a 7. Looking at this, I probably should give Stork a 5-0 instead of a 7-0, but
that makes some sense.
When you say 5-0, you really mean 0-5, right?
Yeah, the 5 pass block. Yes, I say them the other way from Tom.
It's all good. And I think as far as what you were speaking between Vollmer and Solder, if you look at their negative plays, what the area that you have, Vollmer has half as many negative plays, so he has 6.5 penalties / sacks given up, whereas Solder has a combination of 13 penalties / sacks given up. So maybe that's where you get bumped down.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, the penalties is a combination out there. You get those off of hosted stats, and it tells you how many holding penalties they had, and I think how many offsides. But so it does give you kind of a rough. But I think that's also part of it. Exactly it. He had 13.5 negative plays.
Now, I haven't had Rob Gronkowski in any of my leagues, and so I can't remember off the top of my head. Is he usually is he usually a 5 or a 6, or is he usually a 4?
4. I felt he should have been a 5 in the past or a 6, and he's always a 4.
Yeah, so that reinforces what you were talking about last broadcast, that the tight end receiving tends to nerf the blocking, which is a shame in his case. He's known as a great two-way tight end, and he's a big guy, so I'm a little surprised that Strat always gives him a 4. They shouldn't do that. That's my view. So let's move on to the Dennis. I'm sorry. Anything else in the Pats?
I guess the linebackers are interesting. You have 2 6 linebackers and a 0 outside linebacker. I know Jamie Collins has been talked about as kind of a sleeper, that now he's no longer a sleeper. Everybody sees how much of an impact he has in that defense, and Donta Hightower as well. Do you think how does that outside linebacker 0? I don't have Akeem Ayers in any league. I know they picked him up at the last minute from the Titans for like a really cheap price, either a low draft pick or off waivers. But talk about the outside linebacker spot there.
Well, this was an interesting team because I can never figure out who plays where, ever. I mean, for like 10 years in a row, because Belichick plays like 900 formations. And, this year Chandler Jones got hurt. It was 4 years ago. They used to play a more 3-4 defense, but they've kind of gone off of that, and now Ninkovich is the end. I mean, Jamie Collins, I thought, was spectacular in the football game yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was fantastic in coverage and across the board. I think Hightower was solid, but I really liked the 2 6s with the 0. Ayers didn't play or start a whole lot. It's a good rushing team, but I like having to cover up the 0 over there for the middle linebacker. I think it fits. You can put a second tight end over there on him, and he's going to have to cover every once in a while. So I like how this team plays out. I know I heard some people with Browner and Chung, but you could see that you could throw on those guys yesterday. So I think I got this team pretty close. I think I got this one pretty good.
Good deal.
To bring some NFL analysis into this briefly, Dennis, I was curious watching that game over the weekend and looking at Jamie Collins, and they say he's so fast, and he certainly looks fast. If we get a New England-Seattle Super Bowl, I wonder if they're going to try and have Collins shadow Russell Wilson, and I wonder if he's going to maybe be effective at it, because no one seems able to shadow Russell. Whenever he wants to run, he just finds a seam, runs straight upfield for at least 12 yards, first down, and always with that famous slide, never getting hit. I wonder if a guy like Collins might be able to do a good job against him and maybe contain that a little bit. So let's watch for that if we get that Super Bowl matchup. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints, a team that disappointed, I think, this year. I think a lot of us felt they were going to do well, and they didn't. But the offense still put up a lot of points. The defense struggled. Teron Armstead, 4-7 at left tackle. I like that. The offensive line looks pretty good. Not the ratings of a couple years ago, but still a pretty solid group. You got Jimmy Graham as a 4, but he said he might revisit that. I think most of us would probably assume as 0 based upon what Strat did last year. I was surprised to see the Saints at a 4-3. I'm not going to make you review that if you didn't listen to our first show. Tyke said that the teams are getting it pigeonholed 3-4 4-3 by Strat, and he looks at who's starting, who's getting snaps, and it's pretty easy to it can be pretty obvious from that whether they're going to get a 4-3 or a 3-4. I didn't realize Akeem Hicks had moved inside this year. Junior Glad becomes a down lineman if you're getting a 4-3. I like Keenan Lewis getting nerfed to a 4. I like Kenny Vaccaro getting nerfed. He was benched. So again, I don't have anything here that leaps out at me as like, wow, why is this guy getting that?
I have a feeling that Keenan Lewis might get and if we have a different human being doing the ratings, who knows? But on the principle that we have at least 2 5s, I think the second best player on the defense might be Keenan Lewis. I could see him getting bumped to a 5.
Okay.
It just in terms of how the team played, may not have 100%, but I think he's the second best player probably out there to Jordan. It depends how much if James truly did retire, but I could see Lewis getting a 5 back there.
I didn't realize going through that you had only 1 5 here, but now we do know the rule. Tyke says pretty much every team, no matter how historically bad they have been, even the 0-16 Lions gets at least 2 5s on defense. Dennis, what do you got regarding the Saints? Any observations?
I think Cameron Jordan might stick with his 6. He's the best player they have on defense. I think that the other ratings, like you said, Tom, great job by Tyke. They look solid. Let's talk a little bit about their pass blocking and Drew Brees' performance. So I still see they didn't give up a lot of sacks again. Is that right? So is there a chance that a couple of those 4s become 5s, either between Teron Armstead, Ben Grubbs, or Zach Strief?
Dennis, you're reading that the wrong way.
Oh, sorry.
Those 4s becoming 5s. Those are run block ratings.
Right. Got me again. Okay. So yes. So you got 7-7, 5-5. That seems right to me.
Strief is a guy that could be very well. They've had him up and down. It's a pretty decent pass blocking team considering. I think they said yardage wise they were first in the NFL, but I do see Evans dropping down to a 5-6 this year from the 7-6. It'll be interesting to see how they do the rest of the team. I think Armstrong probably gets a 7, so this will be an interesting team there.
Yeah, the defense looks ripe to be shredded, that's for sure. And by having so many low numbers in the secondary, if you were playing the Saints, you could see how you could be effective using the free safety blitz with the Cameron Jordan and Junior Gillette outside, helping you to bring pressure. Of course, with no pressure up the middle, you're not always going to get there. So it seems like it would play fair if this is the way Strat cards them.
Yep.
I like that call, Dennis, on Cameron Jordan possibly getting a 6 or keeping a 6. I think he's kind of established himself, and even though he didn't make the Pro Bowl, whatever, I could see Strat possibly deciding to do that. Although I'm always reluctant to say something like that because I know there are hard numbers on 6s, which Tyke will be glad to reinforce to us if we get too carried away with giving out 6s.
Well, if you give one, you got to take it.
Okay. Yeah, but he's certainly a good enough player, regardless of if Strat gives it to him or not. So the next team, Jets, Jets. Yes, I'm glad I'm not in any stock replay leagues with the Jets next year. That would be quite a chore. I've seen enough of Geno Smith to last me one lifetime. I'm a big Jets fan, for those who don't know. And looking at the Jets, let's see, a little surprise in the offensive line with the left guard position and the right tackle position. I thought maybe we'd see more zeros out of these guys, particularly former Seahawk that we got saddled with, Bruno Giacomini. He was terrible. God, he was awful. I couldn't stand him.
Mark, Cowboys defense projected him as a 0-2, which is a big step down from a 4-4.
And this is very possible. I do not get much of a chance to watch the Jets. Now,
you're lucky.
The thing with the Jets, and I know a lot of these yards that they've got here, the rushing yards are from the quarterbacks. I know Geno Smith ran a lot. And I know Vic didn't play a lot, and he ran a lot. Even with the percentages that I have, I still have them running the ball a lot. So I kind of gave out some 4s and things like that in some spots. I know Cologne's been around for a while, so I would think if Bruno, or however you say his name over there, if he gets a 0, I would say Cologne probably gets a 4.
I'm hoping that soon you can say his name as ex-Jet. We need a new offensive tackle over there.
Yeah, he'll get picked up by the Lions or something like that.
I look at this Jet defense, and so many teams that do as terribly as the Jets did this year, they're 4-12. I think a lot of fans out there might be surprised to see a 6-5-6 defensive line, even though they know the Jets have a good defensive reputation and they have played great run defense. And I think they were still a top 10 overall defense in the NFL in yards, despite how poorly they did against the pass. But I think these two players on the outside, Muhammad Wilkerson, former Pro Bowler, Sheldon Richardson, last year's Defensive Rookie of the Year, I think as players they're both worthy of 6s. Do you think that because of the Jets' performance as a team, maybe Strat says, boy, 6-5-6 too strong, let's go 5-5-6, and maybe one of these guys only gets a 5, maybe Wilkerson because he was injured, didn't play as many games?
Very well could happen. I like both of them to. The thing is, we talked about in the first show is that even with these guys being 6s, those defensive players only come up 6-8 times on the D card. So even with those great ratings, you can still hand out some bad things on the rest, on 6 and 7 in particular. So Wilkerson's been the 6. I think Richardson stepped into that notch this year, and I think they're 6-5-6, but it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. It's just Wilkerson's been the 6 for 2 years in a row, I think.
Sure. In the Jets secondary, I see you've got 4-0 at corner with Darren Walls getting the 4, 4-0 at safety, Devon Landry getting the 4, Calvin Pryor getting a 0. Calvin was benched during the season and struggled in coverage. It was good against the run, but that doesn't help you that much in Strato. At times this year, the Jets were really, really blasted down the field deep. 4-4-0-0 is pretty weak. Do you think there's any possibility that they're even weaker than that? That maybe they go 0-0 at corner. How many teams do you see in a set or historically that goes 0-0 at corner? That would have to be pretty tough to come by.
That would be tough, and you don't see it very often. I'd have to go back and look at the last couple of years. Green Bay was horrendous and gave up 300 yards a game passing. The Saints team from a couple years ago, I think most of those teams, one of those teams had 3 zeros, but for the most part, you see a couple of 4s back there. This team's hard to grade because they did 234 yards passing, but 31 touchdowns. So,
sure.
It's tough. But with that 0 free, and if they're giving up all those, LGs and the empty long pass column, it's going to be really, really difficult to cover that up.
Yeah, 4-4-0-0 is a pretty bad secondary, so I could see that happening, and certainly Walls would be the corner to get the 4 as the Jets floated a million guys in on the other position, thanks to our great work of our former general manager, came out of the Seahawks front office. Dennis, you saddled us with that guy.
Well, not for much longer, from what I hear. But anyway,
he's gone now. We got rid of him. We fired him. Thank God. You could take him back. So
he was a numbers guy. He wasn't really a talent evaluator. So they would have been much better off taking Trent Kirchner. But I guess John Isdick interviewed well, or had some pictures that the Jets owner didn't want released, or something. I don't know what he was, but he definitely wasn't the right man for the job.
Yeah, it sounds like Isaiah Thomas when he was the GM.
Yeah. Oh my God, no, he was terrible.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's not a good time to be a Jet or a Knicks fan, that's for sure. Dennis, you got any comments on the Jets, or should we move on to the Giants?
I like DeMario Davis. I just think, like you guys said, the defensive line is going to, soak up those ratings for a 4-win team. He's not going to get the 5 that maybe his play deserves, but if one of those guys slips, maybe he'll get one of those in future years. But I think you have the Jets pretty much nailed.
I'm really curious one thing about the Jets regarding the NFL speculation that the Jets are interested in hiring Seahawks defensive coordinator Dan Quinn as their head coach after Seattle's season ends. 4-3. I've always felt that Quentin Coples just looks like a 4-3 defensive end. He's always been a little awkward out in the space. It'll be interesting for them to slide Coples at the defensive end, slide Richardson inside to tackle, and that'd be a pretty hellacious 4-man front. So that'd be interesting to see if what happens to the Jets going forward in the future. Moving on to Big Blue, the New York Giants. Tom Coughlin keeps his job. You have to like how in this era where a team has one bad year, they want to fire the coach. Teams like the Giants and Steelers are just like, yeah, no, we got our guy. We'll check back with you in about 10, 15 years on a reevaluation. So that's kind of neat, I think, kind of old school,
I hate those Super Bowls that they win, and then everybody, the Coughlin won a couple of Super Bowls. Everybody forgets how quickly. Boy, I'd take him in a heartbeat. But
yeah, especially guys multiple Super Bowls, and it's not like he had the best team either time really. Look at the Giants. They've got a young guy at left guard. He's a 4-5. That looks pretty solid. Justin Pugh, you've got him as a 4-5 again. He's a first-round pick from the year before. That looks pretty solid. Boy, you go in that defense, 0-0 on the left side of the line. I guess that's where you're going to run it because you got 5-6 on the right side. I was kicking myself in a draft last year. I really liked Jonathan Hankins a lot. Read a lot of good things about him as a rookie. And he just looked like that guy who's going to be the next solid Giant defensive lineman. I think I took Sylvester Williams over him because Sylvester was a first-round pick, and Denver's going to have a good run defense. And of course, Sylvester was terrible, and Hankins was good with not only against the run but with pass rush. Jason Pierre-Paul returned to form, especially late in the season. 6-12-1 will make owners of him happy. Giant linebackers. I can't remember a team since I've started watching it so closely in the last 5, 6, 7 years that pays absolutely no attention to who their linebackers are. It's like all their linebackers are like UFAs, journeymen. It's every year, and I guess they don't care. I guess they want to play that way.
It's hard to believe that Mark Herzlich has started for multiple years for any team. He's a special teamer.
Yeah. This is interesting, and I got to go back and look. I meant to go back when I realized it, but the 0-0 at the left end and left outside. Now, they did give up 135 yards a game on the ground, but I'd have to go back and see how many of that 0-0 Strat gives out. I'm going to guess not too often.
I think I remember one of those dreadful Colts teams from the early '80s. It might have been the 08-1 team from '82. Was like 0-0-0, like left end, left outside, left corner, which is kind of funny. I think that team might have the most zeros in Strat history. It was in the 81 or 82 Colts. I forget. They were pretty bad. They might have like 7 zeros. I don't know. But Kiwanuka's a guy that like 4 or 5 years ago, I really loved him, and I thought he was going to become like a pass rushing specialist at the least, and it's just never happened for him. I really don't have too many comments on the rest of the Giants here. Dennis?
I can see Kiwanuka getting that 4 after, like you said, probably not going to go 0-0 on that side.
Yeah, and he's always been either a 4 outside or a 4 in, so by default, Kiwanuka probably gets a 4 over there.
Let's talk quickly about their secondary. Stevie Brown is a guy that was injured last year. He's had a 5 in the past. He's come back this year. Is there any chance he gets something other than a 0? Did he miss more time this year, or is it just poor performance?
No, this was a missed time thing for me, and actually, I think Prince, the corner over there, I think he was hurt too. I can't remember how many games he played, so I don't know if I was sure whether or not to rate Prince or not. I can't remember how many games he played. But Brown came back injured, and I just looked at it, and he didn't seem to grade out well in a pretty average to poor secondary. Washington's not very good. Who else we got? Dallas, of course, but that's more of a run-oriented team as far as I'm concerned. And then, Philly. So, hard to say with the division that they're in, but he didn't grade out necessarily well. And then I remember looking at him and being surprised because 2 years ago he was a 5, trying to figure out what to do, but he must not have played very well for the 0.
Yeah, I'm just kicking myself. I traded Glover Quinn for Stevie Brown back when they were both 5s to get the additional position flexibility in this league, since one was a free safety and one was a strong safety. But that's one I'm going to regret. So let's move forward.
Come back next year.
Yeah, hopefully.
I just did some quick clicking. Prince Amukamara played 8 games, and then he had a season-ending injury in early November, just to let you know. So he can
he's a guy that's, does he get rated or doesn't he? That's another, I don't think anyone's ever figured out the injury situation, but I went with the 8-game situation, so he got rated.
Yeah, I think he will be rated as the player because I think they floated some other guys in there. I don't think there was this one guy that kind of came in and held down that corner spot after Prince's injury. So I think he'll be listed as a starter for the Giants. In the New York market, we get every Jet game and every Giant game. A lot of fans watch both teams. I watch a fair amount of the Giants, and I think he'll be listed as the starter. Moving on to the Oakland Raiders, I just did a very lengthy forum post on them this morning. Some Raiders fan was arguing with me about liking their future as much as the Ravens or whatever. But anyway, look at the offensive line. The Raiders were a pretty miserable offensive team. I know Carr did pretty well for a rookie, but if you said he's not a rookie, then it's not a good offense. Everything here looks kind of in order. Gabe Jackson, the rookie, there was a guy in the forum writing he thought he would do maybe a little better with the rating, considering him a road grader, but the guy had a Raiders icon on his forum post, so I don't know. Defensively, Justin Tuck, the veteran, getting a 5. Justin Ellis, supposedly a good-looking young player. A 4 would look kind of solid for him out of a rookie. Go ahead, Dennis. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I thought I heard you speaking, but it's people in the background.
I got a couple people in the background. I mean, you're okay.
Okay. You got to get one of those big lights like in the old radio studios you see in the movie, and you put it outside your room and it says on air and it's blinking.
Yeah.
That's right. I shut my door and I put I tape a do not disturb sign on my door for this. This is a new innovation. So, Khalil Mack, left outside linebacker, 5'8". This guy was, what was he, the 5th pick in the draft maybe, or higher, the 2nd pick in the draft?
I think the 2nd. I think you're right. 2nd sounds right.
He was a very high draft pick. Everyone raved about him this year. Did not make the Pro Bowl. You have to like him as a future 6, right? Even if you don't see him as a 6 as a rookie?
Yeah, just to touch, I know I had one comment out on the forum that someone was talking about the 2 guards. This was an instance with this team where, they only ran for 77 yards a game, and I think they only had 4 rushing touchdowns all year.
Oh my gosh!
Which is horrendous. Mind you, they're not running anybody back there, but with Penn and Wisniewski being the perennial guys and getting the ratings, it's going to be tough. It kind of played into it for me, giving these 2 guys 0s at only 77 a game. I mean, they're going to have awful running back cards, but I I kind of like this because Penn and Wiz have both been 5s before, and the 2 guards, it's going to make it hard inside the 10 to run the ball.
Well, you know, Tyke, even if Strat decides to give Penn only a 4 run blocking, that still would look okay for a team that struggled to run the ball this much. And like you said, Wisniewski has pretty much established himself as a very solid player right now.
What about Menelik Watson? I know he was a second-round draft pick for them, and he started 9 games this year. I don't see him anywhere on the line. I know he missed the last 4 games or so with injury, and maybe he was benched before that. Did he just not break through, or?
I might, and it's possible I could miss him. You know, I try and use the snap counts. There he is. I got him here. He did start. Probably I may have to put him because he did. He played all the way. It looks like he was the starter officially over Khalif Barnes. So that would potentially be something that I'll have to change. Now, Barnes actually played. Barnes started at right tackle. See, this is one of the hard things about gradings. Barnes started the first 4 games at tackle. Looks like he got hurt or benched maybe, then came back and started at guard, and then finished 14, 15, 16 at tackle when it looks like the other guy got hurt. So very difficult to figure out how to sub these guys in as starters in there.
Yeah, I think Barnes might get the guard tackle type rating, and like might get a better than expected bench offensive tackle rating, maybe a 4.3 or something like that. That you can maybe get by with him in larger draft leagues until he takes over full time as a starter.
Yep.
Obviously, I forgot to mention one rating that really jumped out at me and probably a lot of people. The venerable Charles Woodson getting a 5. I did read a comment on the Raiders section of ESPN.com where there were people who said that he was improving at his age over where he was the last year or two. He didn't chart out the best on Pro Football Focus. You do have at least 2 of the 5s on defense. You have 3 of the 5s on defense. That really surprised me. I was thinking a 4 or 0. I figured the guy's maybe about to retire. What were your thoughts behind giving the future Hall of Famer a 5?
I thought Charles played well, and this is one where, I know the stats, but I think I probably, I'd have to go back and look at which site am I thinking about here? Advanced NFL Stats. But, the rest of this secondary was pretty horrendous. You can certainly make the argument for Woodson to be a 4, but as a whole, I thought he was the one guy out there that at least played somewhat decent out of them, and I just thought that somewhere in there he had a 5 coming to him.
No, I think he's definitely a 5, and he could get a surprise 6. I just think he played really well. I know it's a bad team, but this is his best season since 2010. 112 tackles, 4 interceptions, almost double digits in pass defenses. He's
tough division,
and he flashed on one of their national televised game, their first win against the Kansas City Chiefs. He made several big plays in that game, and I know that Strat may not take that into consideration, but it just showed that he was playing much, much better than he's played in recent seasons.
Yep.
I picked him up as a throw-in in a deal last year to give me a free safety 4 for the year, so I'd be happy to take anything you got out there. There was something that you just said that I thought was interesting. You said you think he gets the 5 back there, and I've heard you say that in our last show about a couple teams. I think he gets the 5 back there. Do you feel like that in general a team is going to have at least one guy who's a 5+ in the secondary?
No, sometimes I have there's always the opinion and feel part of giving the ratings out. You just and sometimes you feel there needs to be a rating and kind of like we were talking about with Dallas yesterday. We were looking at their defensive line, or not yesterday, but we looked at their defensive line and went, there's probably got to be a 5 on here. And actually, we didn't go back, but I have made some changes to the preview, and one of them was giving Crawford a 5 over there. I was between him and Mincy. Mincy, I thought, played really good in the game against Green Bay yesterday, but I did give Crawford a 5, and sometimes I just get the feeling there needs to be a guy or a rating back in certain spots, especially with the double zeros back there.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. I know what you mean. Neither Dennis nor I look at this stuff as closely as you do, but you play the game long enough, and you do feel like, gee, I don't know. Cowboys, they should have a 5 in the line, or whatever the situation may be. So there is room, I think, for instinct and gut here, right?
Yep, and that's it. I mean, sometimes no matter, even though I'm trying to predict what Strato's going to do, it's still
Sure.
opinion no matter what we do in the end. So.
Moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles. Boy, look at this offensive line. I don't know why I thought you had predicted Lane Johnson as 6. Maybe Mark Lepage did. I don't recall. But, boy, look at this line. 6'6" at center, left guard, left tackle. I think all three of those guys made at least the Pro Bowl, if not the All-Pro team, right?
Yeah, and this, and I can explain this one actually because Kelsey and Peters both made the Pro Bowl, and Mathis was one of my tweener guys, and you can see he only played 9 games.
Okay.
But I think that LaShawn McCoy had a much, much better second half.
Yes.
And he was not very good, and that was the half that Mathis came back for. And he's been a 6 for the last few years, so sure. He ended up getting one of my tweener 6s out there. If you know, the right-hand side of the line's not so great, but I thought Mathis made sense based upon McCoy having a great second half.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make. It has seemed to me over my many years of playing Strat that if a guy is a perennial 6 and then maybe only plays half a year, Strat often will still give him the 6. It's not quite like Strat baseball, where, well, that's not true if the guy has the stats, but you would think, gee, a guy missed half a year, maybe they're going to grade the position, maybe he's not going to get a 6, but that doesn't seem to be the way they operate. They seem to say this guy is a Pro Bowler, perennial Pro Bowler, maybe he doesn't make it 1 year because he only plays 9 games, but he's still that quality, and they still tend to give the rating.
Yeah, and he could be a 55. The reason is based upon the past Pro Bowler, and I think McCoy had the second. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me he gets a 55, but I just like McCoy's second half to be the tiebreaker there.
Now we had a couple of guys on defense that people certainly had some remarks about on the forum. Connor Barwin just jumps out as boy, he's going to be a great player for people who have him in draft leagues. But Michael Kendricks and Bradley Fletcher probably drew a lot of looks from guys on the forum. Kendricks, a very good young player, had a pretty good rookie year in the second half, did terribly in the first half of the rookie year. I think people felt like he was going to step up and be a solid 5. How do you feel about why Michael Kendricks will be only a 4 this year?
Well, there's it's between him and Benny Logan, and Logan did get I don't know if he got a 0 or a 4 last year. It wasn't very good. But I went off of Logan. Logan had more tackles for a loss. He graded out better across the board. I know Strat has never gone off of tackles or stats. But Kendricks' stats kind of melded into me with some of the other linebackers. If I recall, they kind of melded in with the other linebackers. I liked Logan's stuffs. No, they don't necessarily, but just looking at it as a whole, I thought he was the guy that played a little bit better. It certainly would not shock me. I would probably give Logan a 4 and leave Kendricks a 4 personally before I'd give Kendricks the 5, but
interesting.
On the other side of things, it certainly would not shock me to see Kendricks get a 5 and Logan get a 4. So that's just how I did it when I graded all the players out.
I got you. And Bradley Fletcher, I think you did comment on him a lot on the forum, Derby, and responding to people with him. I think you did. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, I did, and I had him a 0. I know that Mark had him a 5, and you're just going to run across guys like that. It's impossible to, I know exactly how Mark feels. It's hard. You're going through, 1,300 players or 800 players or how many ever it is, and you're just going to run across those guys. I had him as a 0. I don't think he's a 4. And then especially, I like the comments from the guys out on the forum, we got some good eyes out from people on the forum. They got to watch him every day, and trust me, we know when our players stink, and I love the burnt toast, that's when your players suck, and I have a feeling Bradley fits into that, so he gets the burnt toast 0.
Dennis, you got any comments on Philly?
No, I do like Michael Kendricks. I think he'll get a 5, but I think both Logan and Kendricks will get a 5. But like Tom says, you're the one that puts the most time into this, so I will defer to your rating, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, for everybody out there that's watching, I mean, just if I had to go really truly off of what Strat, I mean, Logan was not rated. I think he might have been a 0 last year, which would really lend itself to him being a 4 and Kendricks being a 4 or a 5. Because to make that 2 rating jump, of course, is tougher. I just they play Dallas twice, and they got to play the Morris for Washington a couple of times. The Giants weren't the greatest team rushing, but I just, to have to play those guys, they only gave up 110 on the ground, so took a shot at it.
Nice.
Sounds good.
Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Return to the playoffs after a couple of 8-8 seasons. Let's look at that offensive line. Calvin Beachum was said to play well. He's got a fairly decent 4.5 rating. I do say run block first. David DeCastro, young player, first-round pick who missed his entire rookie season, got a 5.5 from Strat last year. I read that maybe people thought he might have been a little overrated this year and was being talked about more, was maybe given more credit than he was due because he was a former first-round pick. How do you feel about DeCastro's? Well, I see here only 4 sacks allowed, only 4 penalties made and only 2 sacks allowed. How do you feel about his 5.7 rating?
Well, I think he's been consistent. I think he was a 35 or a 45 2 years ago, a 55 last year. This team actually did pretty well in the sack department. 1 every 20 is pretty solid. Usually you see a couple of 7s. Anything over, a sack every 20 passes. Usually you see at least 2 7s on the line.
Okay.
Giving Beachum the 7 over there with 8 sacks. I know Foster had it better, but he gave up 4.5 sacks. He got Gilbert at right tackle, but that's the whole. Only played 12 games, gave up 5. I do not know how Strat does guards. It's really, really difficult to figure out how they do guards. So his pass blocking graded out well. I think with Le'Veon Bell, he gets the 5. So it was kind of a combo with him, I thought. I think he did pass block well, and then I think that with Le'Veon Bell on the team, I think he gets his normal 5.
I do have David on one of my Strat teams. He'll be blocking for Andrew Luck, so I'll be happy to get that 7 if it does indeed come around. On the defensive side of the ball, on the forum, someone was commenting on your decision to list Stephon Tuitt, whatever the hell his name is, as the starter instead of Rick Keisel. I think you responded about that on the forum, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And Keisel, I think, at the beginning of the year didn't even start. Had 7 or 8 backup roles, and I think he played a couple of times randomly. Tuitt ended up playing the snaps and getting the majority of the starts. So, I do trust Pro Football Focus's starts. I think they get those right. So when you have that much turnover at a position, you're most likely looking at a 0. I don't think that they had consistency there. And, the linebackers on this team, of course, are very solid. You're going to have Worlid's over there at left, and you're going to be able to move him up to the line of scrimmage. So,
well, I got to say one thing. It's Kiesel, not Keisel, or wherever you guys are saying it. And I've checked my sources on Beards.com, and they have him as their #1 rated defensive end. So,
okay.
And Ty, you were growing the Kiesel beard there.
I did have the Kiesel beard going there for a little bit.
What happened?
Yeah, though my wife asked me where I was, so I buckled partially under the pressure there.
Fair enough.
It's amazing with Pittsburgh. For years, all those great linebacker ratings, and then the last couple of years, it seemed like maybe they were going to start going away, and they're not getting the sacks they used to. And then you come and look at it, and they got 2 12s at linebacker. So I know Dick LeBeau just resigned, not retired, but it'll be interesting to watch. It seems like my whole life, the Steelers have been getting great linebacker ratings. I mean, obviously the Steel Curtain teams, and then even through the 80s, some of those guys would get good ratings. It's just amazing. What do you think about the William Gay 5 at corner? I think some guys were maybe a little surprised at that.
I'm going to stick with William as a 5. I think he's the Orlando Skandrick of the Pittsburgh defense.
Okay.
The other guys graded out really poorly. I guess I can see a 4 back here. I'm looking at 30 passing TDs and 253 yards. But, I was shocked at the 5 last year, and I was shocked, too. I went back and looked at him over and over because I think last year might have been his first 5 ever. Went back, looked at him, and couldn't quite figure it out because I didn't think he was the starter. But this year I think he played in the nickel and the slot against the guy, but I think he started all the games. He graded out pretty well on all the websites. So I stuck with the 5. I think he's at least a 4.
Okay. Dennis, you got anything else on Pittsburgh?
Let me try as I'm growing in this technology method of producing whatever the heck we're doing here. Let's go to the highlights and see how William Gay did.
Oh no!
He had a fantastic touchdown dance. I love this. Let's see. Are you guys getting that or no?
Right now we're black screened.
It's not coming. The video doesn't come through.
There it is.
It flashed for a second.
It flashed.
No, can't get it. All right, we'll keep working on that. But William Gay had 3 return touchdowns or 3 pick sixes this year. Wait a minute, or was that for his career? Anyway, his interception return for a touchdown dance this year. Yeah, he had 3 interceptions. I think they were all returned for touchdowns, and just a fantastic touchdown dance there. So,
we'll
Dennis, keep working on getting that technology working perfectly. But for now, I think dance, so give him a 5.
I think we're going to have to get our intern on that, I think, is what we have to do.
Yes. If you're looking for work, come down and we'll give you college credit for it. Trust me.
Yes. Moving on to the San Diego Superchargers. They're kind of a weird team. Early in the year they look great, and then they flounder, and they do that type of thing all the year. Every year it seems like. They're start out terribly and then come on, and they go up and down. And I mean, last year I don't think anyone predicted they were going to go into Cincinnati and dominate the Bengals, but I think the Bengals have pretty much proven that they're going to sleepwalk through every playoff game of the Andy Dalton era. So some guys had some comments on the offensive line. I think a decision of who is starting at right guard that you listed there, but the rating's not that great. We shouldn't spend any time on that. I was surprised to see Jarrett Johnson retain a 5 at outside linebacker. He's an older player. Maybe I fall too easily into the category of saying, guy's older, he's falling off, he's going to get a 4 unless he's on a real good team or unless he's a real superstar like Julius Peppers has been through his career. What are your thoughts on Johnson's 5, Jarrett Johnson?
Well, he's been a 5 now, I think, the last 2 or 3 years over there. I know he was on Baltimore prior. But I kind of wanted a 5 on the linebackers, and he graded out well. And then you got Reyes with the 0 over there. You got Lismore with the 4 at nose. I know Butler's been a 5 in the past, but none of these guys graded out especially well. And Johnson's pretty much kept his 5 intact now for a few years. So to me, it kind of made sense to be able to give him a 5 over there as the backup to kind of stick in the tackle in the end spot.
He's another guy. I picked up him and Charles Woodson in the same trade last week. I think my trading partner is going to be unhappy if they're both 5s next year, but we'll see. Anything for you, Dennis, on that San Diego defense or on the Chargers in general?
No, it looks good to me. I like the way you graded them out. I think this might be a team you hit 100%.
Yeah. I'm always impressed with how accurate these look in terms of I could definitely see Strat doing that, and sure, Strat does go in a different way, like you said sometimes, but it seems like even more so in today's show. I look at these defenses and they seem pretty much right on the money. Moving on to the San Francisco 49ers. Now now with Jim Harbaugh as an ex-coach. Offensive line looks like it's fallen off a little bit, which makes some sense. Anthony Davis no longer a 6 but a 5. But as you have pointed out, there are generally very few, and sometimes even the 0-6 run blocking at right tackle, right?
Yeah, no, the right tackle spot, usually you only see, and he hasn't been a good pass blocker ever. You know, he got the 1-6, but he hasn't been but there's usually only 3 or 4 7-rated pass blocking right tackles. It's a very you know, if you're playing in the swaps, you know, loose swaps and draft leagues, it's not a big deal. You can put them, but if you're playing real positions, finding a right tackle that can pass block can be very difficult. But I like how I did the O-line on this team. I didn't think it was all that difficult because, you know, you got Staley and however you say Ayapati over there at left guard. You know, Boone and Davis have had the ratings before. Martin's the new guy in there at center. He only played 8 games. Vernon Davis, I don't know where he was this year.
Yeah.
You know, that hurts me, actually. He's on my team. That hurts me quite a bit. But the offensive line, I think, has got to be pretty close. I think the left guard there, he gave up the most sacks for a guard in the NFL, possibly.
Oh, wow.
He could be a 0, but...
Yeah, it was a 0 left guard. I mean, 8 sacks is not good for a lineman, but, boy, 0 left guard against a 3-4 defense, that's pretty tough to live with. I think a 2 would probably be a little fairer, what you have him as. Interesting. You know, I wouldn't be surprised when you see a guy like Vernon Davis, and he inexplicably has the type of season he has. I wouldn't be surprised if it means that he was playing hurt for a lot of the season. Sometimes you'd hear about those things, and all of a sudden you hear that a guy has like a minor off-season surgery or something.
I think another thing with Davis is that, and this happens with the Seahawks too. The 49ers gave up 52 sacks last year. Kaepernick was under a lot of pressure, so sometimes they'll keep Davis in to block, just like they used to do. The Seahawks did with Zach Miller. So he's not out in the pattern. He's not going to get the catches. But I also think you're right. I don't think he was 100%. He didn't show that same explosiveness even when he was running pass patterns. And he had a couple long receptions called back for penalties, so those are not going to show up in the stats either.
Yep.
A lot of interesting things here in this San Francisco defense that you projected. Obviously, the Niners dropped off this year. They weren't as good as they were in previous years. Had a ton of injuries on defense. Most notably, we don't have any ratings for Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis, who have been the heart of that defense.
Thank you for finally taking away the 3 or 4 6s across the line at linebacker for the 49ers. Thank you.
That's cool.
Looking forward to playing them next year.
You know, Ahmad Brooks, actually, I heard on a blog midway through the season, was getting benched on 3rd down for passing situations for somebody as a backup. So, you know, I know he was playing strong in the first couple, but they were starting to take him out, and he wasn't happy about it. Borland played well, you know, as a backup. So actually him as a backup, considering he's 3rd string technically almost, because you got Bowman and Willis out as a 5, is pretty amazing. And then Aldon Smith, of course, suspended amongst other things.
Yeah, I think that linebacker, I read the same thing with Bowman, not Bowman, Ahmad Brooks. He was complaining about his playing time. I think Aaron Lynch was a linebacker. There we go, rookie out of South Florida that was playing a bit and playing pretty well for the Niners this year. And Ahmad's a free agent. Already speculation he might end up in Washington with the former 49er personnel guy over there as a GM now. So Borland, everyone read good things about him. You got him as the 5. Quentin Dial filled in for injuries as a 4 at nose tackle. Why do you feel like free safety Eric Reed is only a 4? He was a rookie 5 last year, wasn't he? Or was he only a 4 last year?
No, he was a 4, and I did struggle a little with the secondary back here. It was, you know, but it's not a passing division in general. I mean, Arizona was, you know, and then you got
St. Louis,
St. Louis, and Seattle. It's really not a good passing division at all.
No. Who is that? Who is that?
Reed was a 5 in the last set, so he wasn't a 4. He was a 5. It's Vaccaro that probably should have been a 5 based on his rookie year. That was the 4 safety that went in a
Okay.
lot of first rounds last year. So, but Reed was a 5, and you saw him going in the top 10 in a lot of drafts last year.
Yep.
Uh,
And I was very in between with Cox and Culliver, and I like Reed's 4. I can't say that I'm 100%. I don't know if Bethea is truly a strong or if he's a free. I thought he was always a free for Indy. But Focus listed him at strong, and then the corners I was in between, but I felt one of them deserved a 5, and Culliver seemed to between advanced and Focus gets the 5. So I'm a little unsure. If there was a team in the secondary that I was a little unsure about, this was definitely one of them.
And Bethea made the Pro Bowl, right? That's why you have him as a 6?
Yeah, but they made the Pro Bowl, so he's the easy one. Reed really did not grade out well on anything anywhere.
Okay.
So I feel like his 4 is justified. The corners were the 2 guys that I had problems with.
Yeah, Bethea was making plays all year too, so he deserved that Pro Bowl nod, and he deserves his 6.
Now you mentioned that the division, their opposition in the division, not a lot of good passing games. Who's that quarterback in Seattle that struggles to put up the big passing numbers? I always forget who that guy is.
His name, it's escaping me right now.
Okay.
Let me do a little research on that. I'll get back
look it up, Dennis. Find out who's quarterbacking for the Seahawks. And speaking of which, I'm probably going to mute my mic here for about the next 20 minutes. Next team on the list is the Seattle Seahawks. Blah blah blah. Dennis, you go talk about the Seahawks.
Okay, let me get the ratings up here. Let's see. Okay, so you have. I would love if this is the offensive line for the Seahawks, despite having 3 pass blockers projected. Russell Okung was hurt, so was Max Unger. If they both get 5.5s, that would be a blessing. James Carpenter, who actually received a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro vote, which was surprising, getting a 5.4. Sweezy and Britt getting a 5.3 and a 4.3 respectively. I would be shocked if that is the ratings that they get, simply because they do seem to give up a lot of sacks, and Wilson is under pressure quite a bit. Talk a little bit about their offensive line. Do you think they really will bring home those decent pass block ratings?
Well, I think Okung did play 14 games. He's got the penalties. I'm assuming that a lot of them could be offsides, etc. But I think, what was he, a 45 last year, 54, whatever he was in there. I think you might see something similar, but only giving up 3.5 sacks is pretty solid. It looks like the struggle was with Britt at right tackle and the 2 guards. Unger, I wasn't going to rate him on 6 games, but then it looked like it was a pretty much random at center. I couldn't find anybody else that played more than 6 games. I don't know, has he played in the playoffs?
He was back starting for them, and he got nicked up a little bit at the end of the game, but he's probable. I think he'll be probable and will likely play in the conference championship.
So he will. To me, he definitely gets rated. There was nobody else that played more than 6 games at center, and he's playing in the playoffs. So here's another Bob Sanders-ish example. He's in the playoffs. He's playing. He played more games than the other guys they put in there. So Unger for sure gets rated to me.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
I was surprised, as Dennis might tell you from our rookie spring draft preview show, to see Luke Wilson getting a 6 as a run blocker. I know Zach Miller used to get it for the Seahawks. People, I think of him as more of a receiving tight end. Maybe I'm wrong about that. What's your feel on that projection?
Well, I mean, we can refer to Dennis on this one, but I think he was perhaps the highest rated run blocker.
Yeah, but Dennis thinks they should all be 6s on the Seahawks.
Yeah, well,
that is not true. That is a rumor. I think there's no chance that Luke Wilson will get a 6 run block. I would love it, and he has worked on that part of his game, but his main strengths are his speed and his receiving ability, and obviously Seattle doesn't have the most dynamic passing offense, and that's by design. They're more of a 70s run first type of team, but they can throw it when they need to, and he will have some very, very effective strat cards. I think he's the type of player. I've talked to Zeb about him. he is the type of player that will be more effective in Strat than probably in the NFL, just because he had a max card last year, 39 with a dot. He's got an 80-yard touchdown reception, so he'll have 80 with a dot in this next coming set. So those kind of players with a high receiving average are very effective in Strat. So I don't see him getting a 4, but I can see him getting a 5 simply because Zach Miller, who may or may not get rated due to injury, perennially got a 6 run block rating. So that could play some influence on how Strat cards them. If they card Zach with a 6 as a backup, then he probably will get a 4. But if they don't card Zach at all, then I could see Wilson getting a 5.
And I think Luke Wilson, as a rookie, has blocking back on the card, right, Dennis? So if he got blocking back on the card again with the longest of 80 and actually a pretty decent average, even if you take out that 80-yard catch, then he will be one of the more desirable blocking backs in the set. You know, maybe not along the lines of quite like Darius Green's card last year, or maybe the old Marcel Reese or Charles Clay type of guy, but a guy the next level below that, as we all look for a blocking back who can do more than catch 6 passes on his track card. So
yeah, I like him as a 4-4, 4-3 blocking back / tight end.
As we look at this mighty Seahawks defense, and you got to say it's just amazing the run that they're on in the NFL, the last 6 games of the regular season and the playoff game against Carolina. In terms of the average points allowed, you got 1, 2, you got 3, 4, you got 5 6s on the defense here. I think all those guys were Pro Bowlers at a minimum. You got Kevin Williams, the defensive tackle, 5. Bruce Irvin as a 5'12" outside linebacker. Some people feel like he's only going to be a 4 again. What are your thoughts on the left outside linebacker for the defending champion Seahawks?
Well, this was a team, and I can defer to Dell. I was waiting to get to this team to talk to Dennis, but I struggled because when Mebane got hurt, he did not play enough games to get rated to me, and at least stat-wise, none of these guys along the defensive line really screamed 5 to me. But then you've got a team that only gave up 81 yards on the ground. And, the linebackers are fabulous, but originally I actually had the 3 defensive linemen as 4s and the 5s at linebacker, but I felt like I needed to have a guy. Now, McDaniel could end up being the 5 over there because Kevin Williams looked like he wasn't even starting full-time until Mebane got hurt. So this was a team actually between Irvin, Williams, McDaniel, and Avrill's always been a 4 or a 0 for the Lions. I'm very familiar with him. So, but I did struggle with those 3 guys between McDaniels, Williams, and Irvin a little bit.
Yeah, just to give you another perspective, Mark had them rated in Bennett as a 6, McDaniel as a 6, Kevin Williams as a 5, and Averill as a 4. So I think I'm more leaning towards McDaniel as the 4 than for him getting a surprise 6. I could see Averill getting a 5. I know he wasn't an impact player in Detroit, but he sure has been for the Seahawks. Him and Michael Bennett took up a large percentage of the playing time this year, whereas
he played more snaps, way more snaps than anybody else.
Right, and they're not just snaps; they're impactful snaps. He got a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Same with Bennett. So I could see them being Bennett being a 6-7 and Averill being a 5-5 on the outside. The Mebane rating, I would love to see him get rated, but I think you're right. He didn't play enough, so I wouldn't be surprised. But I could see like a front going 6-4-4-5.
I think I'm going to change that because that's how I had originally wanted to do it, and I think that's what I'm going to go back to. I think that with the how did
McDaniel break down snap-wise compared to Kevin Williams?
Nowhere close to the other guys. I mean, I know that Bennett and Averill played a huge majority of the snaps. I can tell you here in 2 secs.
Yeah, and the Seahawks, like a lot of teams, they'll do a rotation. So you got, especially at defensive end and defensive tackle, those guys will shift in and out. What happened last year is that Red Bryant and Chris Clemens would play on the early downs, and then on pass rushing situations, you had Averill and Bennett come in, but those guys are both gone, so they had to soak up a lot of those snaps. So the Seahawks have been forced to use more of a rotation at the defensive tackle spot, where Jordan Hill came in, picked up quite a few sacks. He'll be a 0-7 type of guy. I don't know if you have him listed here, but you'll bring him in when you're playing this team. You'll bring him in on third downs as your nose tackle when they're in obvious passing situations, and maybe bring the free safety up to bring a little extra heat.
Yeah, so as far as snaps go, Averill was at 736, Kevin Williams 445, McDaniel 413, and then Hill, who you just mentioned, is at 366. So
okay. So if you're gonna give one of those defensive tackles a 5, I think it's going to be McDaniel, simply because he got a 5 last year, and Strat kind of likes to stick with that. And Kevin Williams, probably a 4. It would be very surprising to me if there wasn't a 4 on the defensive line somewhere. So if they all got 5s, aside from Bennett with his 6, I would be shocked. But they're playing well enough that maybe they'll come home with that.
Yeah, and I mean, in Irvin, of course, I thought Irvin graded out. I liked Irvin as a 5, kind of. You can make the argument for him being a 4 with the pass rush because he has the most pass rush out of all the linebackers. So he's a guy that's going to be on the line of scrimmage, more than the other guys probably. So
yeah, I could see him getting a 4. I wouldn't be surprised with that.
And I think I got it. Yeah, that'd be interesting on Irvin. Certainly, the guys who drafted him, as everyone knows, he was a first-round pick, an undersized guy at the time, so he slipped in almost every draft when he was a rookie. So guys who drafted him would be pretty excited to see a 5'12" one out of the Seahawk linebacker. I got an email from someone about your Byron Maxwell projection as a 4. Obviously, you got the 3 superstars out there with Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas all getting 6s. So to me, Maxwell as a 4 made perfect sense. This guy, obviously a biased Maxwell owner, was saying, oh, might he get a 5? The defense is so good, blah, 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 blah. So I bring it up. I think you're right. They'll get a 4. Any comments on that?
It's just, like I said, this is a horrendous passing division. Now, mind you, it's a fantastic defense. I mean, 185 yards, 17 passing TDs. It's fabulous. It's going to be hard to throw at that 4 out there because Earl Thomas can double team, and you can move the KJ Wright and double team back. Dennis can speak to his play. I watched him a few times this year, and I think he played well, but I also think he got thrown at a lot too because nobody wants to throw at Sherman too. So
yeah, I think that's just a matter of it's a numbers game. I think he missed some time with injury as well. I think he'll be a 4. I mean, I would love to see him get a 5, but not with 3 6s back there. You're not going to get 6 6 6 5. It's just.
They've got the numbers to do it.
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe so. I mean, they have been the number 1 defense for 3 years running. So
yeah, but I think in this case you're right. They're not going to get it. If it was still Brandon Browner, they're probably sure. But I don't think this guy's going to get it. So let's move on to the Rams here as we try and keep to our time schedule here. St. Louis Rams. Look at the offensive line. Really nothing worth commenting on. I don't feel like. Look over the defense, which played so well the second half of the season again. They're such a weird team. They seem like for a couple of years everyone talks about how talented they are, but they only seem to do it in fits and starts. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. Aaron Donald will probably be, if he's not already, I didn't pay attention, the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. Certainly he's in the running. He'll be a very high pick and draft, 6'9" there. You can do have Chris Long getting a rating. I know he was injured for most of the year. Robert Quinn came out with sacks, 6'11". All that looks fine. A couple of things I noticed. Janoris Jenkins dropping off to a 0. I think he was a 4 last year. I'm not sure. Surprised me a little bit. I was glad to see you projected rookie corner E.J. Gaines with a non-0. You got him as a 4. I read a lot of good things about him. And then Alec Ogletree, first half of the season, I think he was charting terribly. I'm not sure how he ended up. So maybe you could comment on Jenkins, Gaines, and Ogletree.
This defense was tougher for me. Statistically, the rushing. I felt like Laurinaitis and Ogletree had to be the same rating whenever they were, and Laurinaitis has always been a 5. You know, Strat has never worked that way. I've seen guys with more tackles and more numbers get 4s and 0s than guys that have less. Laurinaitis and Ogletree both graded out well on all of the websites that I did. Now, this is a really strong front 7, obviously. The statistics, it was very much a rushing division. You got, you know, Seattle in it. You've got San Francisco in it. So, you know, 110 yards a game versus this division is actually pretty good. But you also get Aaron Donald, Brockers, and Quinn up front, too. So, you know, 18 passing TDs. I never do well with the Rams. I think one year I missed them so horribly. They always seem to be my nemesis when I do the preview.
Who was that Rams middle linebacker that the forum was up in arms about a few years ago? We got a 0, but he was a good tackle. That wasn't any. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
Yeah, that was oh man, give me a second. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but I remember. And Strat, I think, changed the rating. I think Strat made him a 4 after that, didn't they?
Yes.
Which is very rare. Change the rating due to
clamoring.
Yeah, customer complaint.
The pitchforks and
exactly.
Spoon. There's something with Spoon in his name. Chris Witherspoon or something.
Yeah.
Spoon.
Yeah. Weatherspoon.
Well,
no, that's not Weatherspoon. It's something Spoon though. Zeb's gonna be laughing at me right now when I
got all of my old previews here. How many years ago would it be?
4 or 5, maybe.
All right, so let's go 2011. St. Louis, right?
Yeah. I think it's further back than that, but maybe.
It could be.
Laurinaitis I've got starting in 11.
Who was their middle linebacker before Laurinaitis? The guy was there for a couple of years.
Laurinaitis is also in 10, so 2009.
No, it's not 2009. Keep going.
Lofa Tutupu or Tupati.
No, that's the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Will Witherspoon.
Yeah, there you go. Will Witherspoon.
There you go.
I knew there was a spoon in there somewhere.
Yeah.
He got bumped up from 0 to a 4 after much upheaval. So.
Yes. I guess it turns out he wasn't so great after all. I don't remember him setting the league on fire after that. So, and the secondary, how do you feel about Jenkins 0 or like you said at St. Louis?
Some comments out there that maybe Jenkins would be the 4. You know, this team, again, I struggle with this team a lot. I've got a lot of ratings out here for it. You know, I got Dunbar's a 0. Long kind of got a default. He came back and played at the end of the year and did start. He's always been a 4 or a 5, so he kind of got his default 4. Jolan's been a 0 in the past, so he got that. The secondary, I think I felt pretty good about McDonald's 5. You know, it was hard to distinguish with Jenkins, I think, and McLeod back there, but they didn't give up a lot of touchdowns, but not a very offensive division either.
No. All right, so we should probably move on to Tampa because we're down to our last few teams. We want to wrap them up as some of our guests or hosts have some other pressing considerations. Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line. Boy, this team had a dreadful season. Logan Mankins got a solid rating. DeMar Dotson. Anthony Collins, unfortunately, is on one of my strat teams. I was all pumped up last year, like he's going to get a good rating. All this talk about how well he did last year at pass blocking, and he gets a nice contract, and then he falls off a cliff. So thanks a lot to Mr. Collins. Looking at the defense, of course, the star Gerald McCoy with a 6, Levante David with a 6. Those two guys are legitimately great players. I'm not sure what else I see here. Danny Lancena played pretty well for them. I'm glad to see you have him as at least a 4, a non-0, I should say. Young Jonathan Banks, he's going to be in the spring drafts, got a 4 at the corner. Deshaun Goldson has been a disappointment in recent years to people that had him when he got that 6 on the 49ers. Nothing else that leaps out at me. Any thoughts, Dennis, on the Buccaneers blocking or defense?
No, I think that Lanzana might be another guy like um, we talked about
Possible
earlier.
five.
Yeah, they might get a surprise five just from the fact that he made so many tackles and seemed to have an impact. He made a couple of interceptions. I think he had an interception or two returned for a touchdown. So those types of plays add up, and I think that he might get a 5-3 there on the outside. That's about it. Everything else looks good to me.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that there's potential there for Lansana, and at the very least, it looks like a guy who should be a solid starter for the Buccaneers for quite a while, as long as Lovey's around. I know you joked last time that Lovey might get fired after next year if they struggle. I think they're going to give Lovey a long leash down there. I mean, they're coming from nowhere practically. So, moving on to the I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They got to get a quarterback. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple of safeties.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're definitely not a complete team, that's for sure. If you don't have a quarterback, it's almost impossible to win. So I don't know why Rex went to the Bills, but we don't have time for that right now. Tennessee Titans, interesting, another very bad team. Along the offensive line, Taylor Lewing is a 4.4. That's a pretty decent rating for a guy on a team that didn't do much of anything on the offensive side of the ball. And as a rookie, he was obviously a first-round pick, so we'll have to watch his rating in coming years to see if he develops as a left tackle. I was a little surprised to see that you gave Chance Warmack a 5.4. It's another high pick on that Titans offensive line. What do you think about that run block rating specifically? When I say I'm surprised about those ratings of the linemen, it's almost always the run block. Your pass block ratings look pretty strong all the time. So what do you think about Chance getting that 5 as a run blocker?
Well, I gave out with Schwenke and Ower. They did this team had a lot of injuries, or guys that didn't play, and I gave Ower and Schwenke 0s. Luan actually came in and graded out really well everywhere, but it's so hard because he only finished the season. I think he might have started the last 6 games. But he graded out really well. I mean, he only gave up the 3.5 sacks in 11 games. He didn't start them all. So I just felt that the 4.4 was the right spot for him. Levitre's always been a 5. And Warmack graded out really well. I mean, they only average 90 on the ground, but they really don't have much out there at running back. I can't remember the kid out there that they were starting. But
Bishop Sankey.
Yeah. So they just didn't have much, in my opinion, so I felt like the offensive line was a good place to stick a couple of ratings with how poor they were, and they graded out really well too. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, obviously, you've got the 2 5s, like you said. You've got 2 0s there also, and the running backs' cards won't be too great. So it's not like they're going to be pounding people on the ground with these run block ratings. The Levitre owners will, and I'm one of them, will obviously be disappointed in a pass block 3, but you've got him as giving up 10, being charged for giving up 10 sacks. So you can't complain too much with only a 3 PB when your guy gives up 10 sacks. Looking at the defense, I was a little surprised to see the left end there. Rapati, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Pituatoa. Say it again.
Rapati Pituatoa.
What he said. He was a 5 last year. I know the Titans were better last year. You got him as a 0 this year. That surprises me. What do you think about that?
Well, at 137 yards a game in run defense, someone's going to suffer out there. I got a lot of guys suffering on this team.
Yeah.
Avery Williamson, Camarion Wembley, and Rapati are 0s, and I got 2 0s in the secondary too. I hammered this team pretty hard apparently, but 140 yards on the ground and 17 rushing touchdowns is pretty brutal. So,
do you think that difficulty against a run makes it unlikely that a guy like Jarrell Casey gets a non-Pro Bowl 6 because he was a 6 last year and has a good reputation? Maybe like Dennis was alluding to, maybe a lot like Cameron Hayward on the Saints. But every time I say that, I right away hear a voice in my head. No, there's a limited number of 6s, so you shouldn't even ask the question.
Here's something to keep in mind with Casey, and I love Casey. I don't have him on my team, but first off, he was a defensive tackle last year. They had a defensive scheme change, and they moved him over to right end. So he is playing a completely different position, number 1. And 2, he was a 5 for 2 or 3 years before.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you got a really horrible run defense. You've got a change of position, and a guy that's always been a 5. Other than last year he had 12 sacks too, which got him in. So he just screams 5 all day long to me.
And Tim Bowyer, some of you guys know from the Strat Leagues and runs Eiffel franchise. I know he had some comment that he thought that right corner, Bleedy Ren Wilson, would probably be a 4. But the guy's a rookie. The Titans gave up 28 pass touchdowns. I don't have a problem with it being a 0. I thought I'd just mention that because I know Tim pretty well, and he posts on the forum a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I know George Wilson was pretty horrible, and he's a 0. McCourty, I think, played well. I don't know much about Bleedy out there, in terms of grading. He's a guy, and I do go back. I did make some other changes off of our first show, so he might be a guy I'll go back and look at and see.
Sure, although with McCourty's reputation, the 5 looks pretty solid there. So on a bad team, why not give the other corner a 0 when he's unheralded? Does that make sense? In my view, just bringing it up from someone else's perspective. Moving on to the Washington Football Club. I didn't see how I did that with the controversy.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah. Nice, very nice, Tom. I like it.
Yes, but then you ruin it when you mention it. But I'll mention it anyway. The Washington Football Club. I probably just got Kirk Klein very angry. Offensive line, Trent Williams, perennial type of guy. Gets a 6-7. Chris Chester on one of my strat teams. He's getting ready to fade into oblivion. He's been in oblivion. He's just sort of confirming his status there. Everything looks normal in the offensive line. Defense, Chris Baker on one of my strat teams, nose tackle. What do we got here for Washington? They gave up 105 yards a game against the run, and you alluded to a division where they got to face Shady McCoy and DeMarco Murray. Any thought that Chris Baker might get the 5? He's a nose tackle. A lot of people have him. Would love to see that.
I know that Cofield, because of course he was on my team, got hurt and didn't come back and didn't play very much. Baker came in, of course, later to take over the job for him. I did look at him as the 5, but these middle linebackers. I think Keenan Robinson's a new guy actually. But all the linebackers I thought graded out really well. And I love this with the 3-4 defense, is the concept of forcing the defensive coach to move the linebackers up to the line of scrimmage to cover things up. I said with Logan, I thought Logan make the plays. In this case with Washington, I thought that the linebackers were the playmakers, not Baker.
Yeah, that 5 rating for Keenan Robinson, I was surprised to see it only because he's sort of new as a starter, but from what I heard, he played very well. So I was not surprised to see it in terms of the quality of the player. Trent Murphy is an interesting young player to me. I agree with the rating. They said he played pretty well with Arakpo out, and he might be one of the reasons why they're willing to let Arakpo walk this year finally, not to mention the fact that the guy's always injured and demands a lot of money. So he'll be interesting to watch in coming years. Now, I mentioned this earlier with the Jets, but I see you did do it to the Redskins, who there I go, I said the name. Oh, well. So you did.
Hold on.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dennis, we need you.
Hold on.
Nice.
Timing. I got to work on this.
Perfect.
The Washington Football Club, you did it to them. They got 2 corner zeros, 35 pass TDs allowed. My goodness, I did not.
Yeah, and that you nailed it. I mean, boy, in a 35 passing TDs allowed. Wow, just bad.
Yeah,
David Emerson's the guy that a lot of people were looking at as a good, solid young quarterback, kind of similar to Bleedy Ray Wilson. They get taken in the second, third, fourth rounds, get put into the starting lineup, and you hope for good things from them. So I take it Emerson didn't grade out well at all.
Yeah, and I picked on this team purposely. None of these guys, graded out very well. And then, actually, there wasn't a truly horrendous passing yardage team this year. I think the worst was 260, 270. I know in years past, Green Bay and New Orleans gave up almost 300 yards a game passing.
Jesus.
So we didn't really have the 2 or 3 teams that were really horrendous yardage-wise this year. But it was hard for me to ignore the 35 passing touchdowns. Clark has been a perennial guy for Pittsburgh, and Merriweather's an on and off guy that seems to get it. So.
I happened to see Washington play a few times this year. I don't know why, how'd that happen, but it seemed like Emerson and Breland were taking turns being lambasted by the announcer for giving up big plays and getting picked on that particular game. So from a naked eye standpoint, I could see it. It'll be a tough time to do a stock replay with these Washington guys. So I think that brings us to a close. Dennis, do you have any comments or general questions for Tyke?
I want to actually see if this works. So how do I do this YouTube thing? Click on Add Videos to Playlist to search for videos to share. Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to.
I'm glad that we have. We're the guinea pigs for Dennis's experiments with linking videos and.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be like when we put in highlights. Can you guys see this or no? So
no.
This is.
No.
We have this. No.
Now he's muted. We did a draft show the other night, and he muted himself, and he couldn't talk. He couldn't talk for like 10 minutes, and now he's muted himself again. I think he's back now. There you go. He's back. Okay.
No, but you guys can't see the video?
No.
Yeah, how does this work? See, so it's got to be something I got to do. Oh, here we go. How's this?
This is riveting viewing for our audience.
Hey, if you guys have made it this far, kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been through 2 hours of this, then yeah, you are a stallion.
I gotta say the show moves pretty quickly though. I listened to the other shows and I didn't feel like I was dragging it any time. So, but then again, that's because I love the sound of my own voice. I'm just I should just tape myself talking for 2 hours and listen to that all day.
2 minutes a team. We go through them pretty fast, but there's a lot of teams. Trust me, when you do the preview, you've been sitting there for 12 hours in a row, and you look down and you're only on Cleveland. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
We'll still work on the
production value
stuff. Because I see the video. I'm watching the video, but you guys can't see it.
Okay.
I don't see
so guys, we're gonna listen to Dennis watch a video now. That's for good programming.
It's exciting. This is gonna be good stuff when we're talking about somebody. We can bring up a highlight play, talk about them, and then go for it. Go with stuff like that.
Yeah,
I agree. When it works, it'll be good stuff. Hey, Tyke, do you have any quick comments on any rookies that you love, particularly on the offensive side of the ball? We did
my favorite players are good ones. But I'm going to have to I got devastated by injuries on my Strat team this year. Rakpo got hurt. Ofield got hurt. Red Bryant should probably get me a 5, but he's going to dip. And then Tolik, of course, with his dance in Green Bay, got hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Get rated. I had Eric Berry on my team.
Oh, boy.
I had Alex Mack on my team.
Oh, jeez.
I had Brandon Albert on my team. I had Josh Gordon on my team.
How many Strat teams do you have? Just the one?
Just the one. Because
okay.
I struggle, if I have 6 or 7 teams, I find myself rooting for multiple players. It's kind of like fantasy football. I just a mental thing for me. So I like having one team and, I look at my guys and my players and I enjoy it. So, but I'm probably going to have to trade Manning. I'm hoping he comes back so I can get a little bit more money for him. But too many injuries out there. I got some good things going. I got Lacey and Bradshaw, and Bolden had a good year, and I had some other good things out there too, but a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I've given up on the technology thing, so I guess we should just go ahead and wrap it up then.
Yep.
I guess so. Thanks a lot, Tyke. Great job as always. We always love the preview. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, Dennis alluded to it on the forum. Tyke does a great job with his preview. But if these aren't official Strat ratings, he can be off, especially on guys. So if you're gonna make trades.
Yes.
Trade saying that a guy's got an unexpected 5, then he gets a 0. That's not Derby's fault. That's on you. So he's doing the best he can. So keep that in mind.
Absolutely. It's all. This is all about having fun, and I love what Derby's been able to do for us, give us a sneak preview on what the set might look like. But again, Strat's the one that makes the final call. So if you want to make a move for a guy, you better make sure you like him. Don't just trade for him because somebody told you to.
Yeah, and in the old days, boy, the preview was even wrong. The Strat preview, they changed ratings between that and the cards. And a few years ago, I remember some ratings changing between the cards and the preview. So
That's right. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good job, everybody. I'm going to keep playing with these until I figure out which one to use.
And if you're a viewer, we'll see you around with doing a spring draft defensive side of the ball show soon. All right, guys, take care.
Coming up later. Okay.